Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for another very special edition of Wowza Live with two ice swimmers, Ned Dennison and Jamie Monahan. Welcome.
Hey, Steve. Hey, Ned.
Hi.
Hey there.
And Ned, you're in Cork, and Jamie, you're in Manhattan?
Yep, that's correct.
Great, great. Today we're going to talk about the International Ice Swimming Hall of Fame. And before most people know you as, long distance swimmers, channel swimmers, extreme swimmers, all kinds of things. But if you could, ladies first, give us a brief meaning under an hour and a half, summary of your ice swimming credentials. Jamie?
Sure. So one thing about me, I've done ice miles on every continent. I was the first person in history to do something called the Ice Sevens Challenge, which is a mile on each continent in any water temperature in open water under 5 degrees Celsius or 41 degrees Fahrenheit. So that was kind of a journey that took me around the world in just over a year in 2016 to 2017. And how I got to that point was I kind of came up within the winter swimming and ice swimming program, starting out with short distances, racing in frozen lakes and rivers, 50, 25 meter distances, then building up to the 450 meter event, the 1,000, and then finally the ice mile. It turned out to be something that I really enjoyed, so decided to take on that challenge, and it took me all around the world. Definitely the people that I've met, I've been fortunate to see some amazing places, swim with ice formations, which is just always amazing, and then also participate in these wonderful communities around the world. So really strong ties to the ice swimming and winter swimming community. And I'm also really proud to be an inductee of the very first class of the International Ice Swimming Association. And shortly after joining that, agreed to help out Ned with administering the Hall of Fame as well.
Sorry, Ned.
Mine is shorter. I don't like cold water, which is fine. I only did ice swimming because Finbar Hederman in Cork said I couldn't do cold water.
Oh.
I've done 2 ice miles, and I think for about a week and a half, I was the world champion at the 1K at my age until Rory from England pipped me on that. And I was involved with Rambarkai as one of the board members early on in IISA. So that was kind of my start in all of this. And by the way, I'm not an inductee, and I will never be an inductee of the Ice Swimming Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about ice swimming because, my first knowledge about ice swimming wasn't from the perspective of an Eastern European or a Scandinavian or a Russian or a Chinese. It was actually reading and writing about Lynn Cox in the Bering Strait. Obviously, she wrote a book and she's an icon in the sport. But now it seems to me there are so many people getting into ice swimming. Again, defined it as 5 degrees Celsius or 41 degrees Fahrenheit and below. And Jamie, you've been around the world. Ned, you have your hooks around the world. Can you both tell me about, how this sport is growing, exploding, I should say? Go ahead, Jamie.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of the history, it really started as almost a wellness tradition in Scandinavia and Russia, where folks had a tradition of cutting a hole in the ice or jumping into really cold water, and then usually following that up with a sauna. You see videos from the Russian schools. The children start really young swimming with their parents, or even in the schools, they'll start by building their immune system by pouring buckets of cold ice water on themselves. So again, it kind of started out as more lifestyle and tradition. Recently, it's become a little bit more of a competitive sport in addition to the wellness side. There's organized events under the Winter Swimming Association as well as the Ice Swimming Association that draw thousands of spectators and participants from all around the world. And the really nice thing about it is you go from an untimed dip where where people are just interested in being in the water and participating in the camaraderie, to these amazing Olympians racing in the ice, doing the 1 kilometer event at the World Championships. So really rich tradition in a lot of different countries. And then the fun competitive side. And the Ice Swimming Association as well is looking to hopefully make it a discipline in the Olympics. So really great track record and really exciting things down the road as well.
To put some more character on that, I went to my first one in London, was held in an outdoor concrete pool. The water temperature was 0.5. I didn't really know what to expect. I sure didn't expect to see 500 swimmers there, which really surprised me. And the average race was sort of 30 meters across the pool. Then there was the fancy hat race, where, you know, people were wearing, you know, no end of creation. The woman that won it had sort of a scale model of the swimming pool, including all the outdoor changing rooms with a wire with a helicopter suspended above her head. And as you say, you know, when you've got joint suffering, you got joint joy, where, you know, everybody is kind of happy. And they spend weeks telling their friends they're going ice swimming, and they spend weeks telling their friends they went ice swimming.
Yeah. So Jamie, you got into it by doing 25 meter, then 50 meter, and then gradually building up. These races initially were or are governed by the International Winter Swimming Association. There's also their newer cousin, if you will, the International Ice Swimming Association. Can you describe the difference between these two organizations and how they coordinate or not?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, they're both amazing organizations, and I've been really fortunate to participate in a lot of the different events that both organizations have set up. I'm also on the international board for the Ice Swimming Association as well. And I would say originally winter swimming started more from that wellness tradition, focused more on the sprint, short events, and just, you know, amazing things like one of their events is actually a synchronized swimming competition in the ice. So a lot of fun, a lot of wellness, still some amazing races, but more focused on the shorter side of the spectrum. I think until recently, the longest distance was just 450 meters. I think the Ice Swimming Association kind of came up in parallel to that. You know, Ram Baikai and some of the founders definitely were interested in kind of pushing the limits to see what people were capable of, which is awesome. So they started to formalize the 1 kilometer events, develop a structure for ratifying and making sure that ice miles were safe, either done through part of an event or on an individual basis. So again, amazing organizations. I don't know how much overlap or coordination there are, but I think there's a lot of respect on both sides, which is really nice to see.
Yeah. Conflict seems to be now at about 1K, Steve. All the organizers of either federation are civil to each other. I don't think there's a tremendous amount of coordination for the moment, but I wouldn't be surprised in the future if people start to say, you know, we're thinking about doing our world championship on such and such a date. Let's make sure we don't have 2 different world championships on the same date. You know, those kinds of things. I don't anticipate a lot of additional coordination beyond something like simple scheduling of big events.
Yeah. And Ned, Jamie built up her ice swimming capabilities to just incredible heights. It sounds to me like you just jumped in basically on a dare. Is that true, or did you gradually build up also?
Well, you have to keep in mind that where I live, Steve, we're swimming in the ocean all year round. So in the winter in Ireland, it's, you know, 8 degrees. We're routinely doing a mile. There is a tremendous difference between 8 and 5. There's a big difference. Prior to my first ice mile, I had done a 1K swim in a pool at you know, kind of 1 degree. So I wasn't silly about it. It wasn't exactly a dare, but I didn't dedicate years and years to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we're talking today about the International Ice Swimming Hall of Fame, which Ned, you were just basically the catalyst to this. What was your motivation to recognize the greats of the ice swimming community?
So I was on the board of the IISA, and one of the things that I was looking at was the sport had been exploding. We were getting great and positive press. There were organizations set up. There were great websites. There were sort of training events happening. So all of the elements of the growing sport were there, except the Hall of Fame. And I said, it's time for a Hall of Fame. And I discussed it first with the board of IISA. And one of the things that happened quite quickly after that is I came off the board because, excuse me, there are two federations and it wouldn't have been fair or appropriate to be still on the board of one. So that was really the motivation. And the first step was to go independent on it.
Got it. Got it. Was that, and then how do you collect or consider that first inaugural class of honorees?
So what I did next was I put together a panel of people, and including people like, Parg Mallon from Ireland, Shelley Taylor-Smith was on it. I'll just Jonty from the UK, Kieran from South Africa, Lizak from Poland, and Paolo from Italy. This was a mix of people who had been to various events, both associations. And probably the most important thing is, in my case, I was never going to be in the Hall of Fame. In their case, they were barred from being in for the first couple of years. So we had a committee that, while we could be criticized, we weren't going to be putting ourselves on the Hall. And that was kind of how we started. I immediately let the Winter Swimming Association know what we were doing. And then we started talking about scope. And it was things like, we accepted ice was 5 centigrades and below. We also had IC, which is 5 centigrades and above. We didn't define what above meant, but it was clearly not a typical North Channel swim. However, if somebody ever does it in January at 6K, it may well be considered that icy swim. We talked about podium finishes at these various events. We talked about inspirational swims, special locations like Mount Everest, first ever swims, things at altitude, swimming under the ice. And again, we said part of the allure of ice swimming is you should be in sort of a Speedo, not a wetsuit. We then also included contributors. And then maybe one of the key things is we understood coming ahead of this is that just because you participated in an event that became in the Hall of Fame, that didn't put you in the Hall of Fame. So we said you would be described as a participant in an honor event in the Ice Swimming Hall of Fame. We said, look, for an event, it has to be within 2 years. And generally speaking, groups of casual groups of swimmers would not be part of this Hall of Fame. So that was the scope. We put together a whole bunch of nominations, and we then voted.
Yeah. And Jamie, you at this point you had not been involved, correct?
No, like I said, I was very fortunate to be part of the first class. I was not involved in nominating myself or kind of bestowing that upon myself. But once I was in, Ned was very kind and reached out and asked me to get involved, given some of the things I had been involved in and, looking for someone to take over that. So thank you, Ned, for getting me looped into that.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure Jamie knew about the Hall of Fame before we called her to tell her she was in.
Great. And Ned, you had the honor of informing her?
I had the honor of informing her and several others. I got some help on some of the Russians, but that first class was Rambarkai as both a swimmer and administrator. The Bering Strait Relay was an honor event.
Yeah.
Alexei Brilin from Russia, an honor swimmer. Henry Karma, Estonia, swimmer. Jamie, swimmer. Famous Lewis Pugh from Great Britain, who lives in South Africa as a swimmer. Maria from the Winter Swimming as an administrator. And then yourself, Steve, was included as an honor contributor for media. So I knew most of the people, and it was a great privilege to call them. What then happened was once we got Jamie roped in, that committee stayed in place for another 1 year, and all of the honorees in also had a vote. And going forward, the votes just by honorees. So there's no special selection panel for the future.
Yeah. Ned, out of curiosity, were you also the individual who called Jamie for her International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame?
I was, and then and frankly, Steve, she called me the year after the ice one and said, "I haven't heard from you in the last year, Ned. What's happening here?" Doing lots of other stuff here.
Yeah, Jamie, you're just so versatile. I mean, really, pool swimming, in your youth, and then the international winter swimming circuit. How many countries have you been in? Have you counted?
It's funny, when I had to reapply for my Russian visa, they actually make you list every country that you've been to. I think there were 30 spots on the application, and it was more than that. So luckily, I think they let me know that it only had to be within the last 3 years or the last 30 countries. So yeah, we'll say 30 plus.
Wow. Just a unrelated question to both of you. Both of you have been to dozens of countries. Have you ever been to a country in which you have not swum in?
In earlier business career, absolutely.
Got
I'm
it.
trying to think. I feel like for most of the ones that initially I may have not swum in, I probably tried to go back and do it. But yeah, I hope they're few and far between.
I did once on business, Steve, take kind of 2 buses to get to a pool in Beijing. At the time I had a beard. They wanted me to wear a cap on my chin. And there were maybe 20 people in the pool. There was an empty lane. I headed down the lane, and when I made the turn, everybody in the pool was in my lane. I think it was a kind of the novelty factor of quite a tall guy with a beard swimming in this municipal pool in Beijing.
Oh,
Interesting
wow.
experience.
Yeah. So Ned, you brought us up to the first year, collecting the nominations, voting on the nominees, informing the nominees. Then what happens in subsequent years?
Jamie and I, we were now public.
Okay.
We did a call for nominations. The ones who hadn't been voted in the first year rolled over. And if my memory serves me right, Jamie, you basically organized it after that, all the voting and the informing.
Absolutely. And then the other change, as Ned said, the first class of panelists that were kind of aside from the organization and not eligible for the first couple of classes, they've kind of rolled off. They're now eligible. And now all of the honorees, the individual honorees, are the ones who'll be voting in the classmates. For this year, we have a couple of technical improvements. The first couple of classes, we actually collected nominations and did voting via an Excel sheet. This year, we're going to do everything web-based form and submit surveys just to make compiling things a little bit easier. But definitely a plug there. We are still collecting. I think with COVID, everything this year has been delayed. The usual timing of this is to collect all nominations by October 1st. For this year, we're going to extend that to November 1st. So anybody who has, a nomination for an amazing swimmer, a unique event, anything in terms of cold or icy waters, we want to hear about it. We really want to recognize all the amazing things people are doing. And especially in these times, it's really important to highlight these impressive and positive stories. So that's my official plug for this year's nominations. Please submit them, reach out for forms. We're here to collect those and administer the process.
Jamie forgot to mention that she put together a great website,
Okay.
Which makes it look very professional. And I guess the other thing, Steve, is that Jamie and I were the audit committee on that second year. And again, it's one of those really important things for people looking at setting up a Hall of Fame regionally, wherever it is make really sure you can avoid criticism when it's first set up. And then just a simple thing like get 2 people to check the results so no one says, Ned did the count and he put his friend in. You just don't need that kind of stuff. There's some simple things to do to avoid that kind of criticism.
Yeah. And what is the URL of this website, and how do people communicate with you?
Yeah, so it's just iceswimminghall-of-fame.com. There's also a Facebook page and an Instagram. If you can't find it, try Googling or just enter that in your web browser or reach out to one of us. We're happy to direct you. But again, there's some amazing stories about our athletes, the events. And for me, I really enjoy the website design piece just because you get to put up and showcase all of these amazing photos. So love these pictures of people swimming in the ice, cold water, frozen rivers. It is really stunning. So definitely encourage folks to check out the website. And that's also where all of our forms are housed as well if you have nominations to contribute.
Yeah,
It's
it
probably
is.
worth mentioning. It's probably worth mentioning, Steve, that there were a couple of people who are already in 46 halls of fame. For example, like Lynn Cox, who temporarily said, "Not now, folks." So we didn't forget about Lynn Cox, but she ruled herself out temporarily. Hopefully, Jamie's working on it for the future.
Got it. Got it. And Ned, I know in one of your other roles in the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame, you are constantly finding out about earlier swims, different people, non-English speakers, or people who had done things off the beaten track. Maybe they weren't in the media. There's got to be the same kind of luminaries in the ice swimming world before it was ice swimming, before it was winter swimming. How do you go about like delving back into the history, whether it's in the 20th century or even perhaps the 19th century?
I'll leave that one with Jamie. I didn't do that one. I got enough on my plate.
Yeah, I would say one area where we probably have room for improvement is with our primarily Russian speaking friends. It's on my agenda to kind of reach out and to kind of solicit kind of more proactively kind of Russian contributions because there's amazing things. I just read about today in Vladivostok. They've designed this amazing event where they do a sunrise swim in Vladivostok to the far east of Russia, then kind of jump in a car. I think it's like, hundreds of kilometers west to the west side of the country, and then they do a swim at sunset. So that was something I think they did just over the weekend. It's amazing now that we can read about this on Facebook and hear about the different events, but there's just a lot out there. So it's there's a lot to uncover, and we're looking forward to that. And again, if you know of something, please reach out to us.
This is great. I mean, I'm going to end this podcast and go immediately to the website. It is absolutely fascinating. I've swum with Ned around Sandy Cove Island. I had the great honor to see Jamie in Germany at one of the world championships. And I was freezing. I was shivering so much, fully clothed. Jamie had got out of the water of an ice kilometer swim with this huge smile on her face, waving to the crowd, no shivering. She was slightly out of breath because she had gone very hard. I mean, what I saw there, Jamie, was beyond what I ever thought possible. And you were truly inspirational. And thank you for that memory.
Oh, it's so fun. And it's like, it is such an exhilarating experience. It's tough when you're racing and trying really hard. And yeah, but then once you get out, you have this feeling of almost euphoria. So I think you probably saw that a lot in Berghausen. And, again, it's such an extraordinary event. Like we were at a pool, an ice pool at the base of the castle. I think it's the longest castle in the world. So, and that's just one story for, participating in these events. So there's just so much out there. So I would also say just a plug for the sport in general. If you haven't tried it yet, please, do what you can to give it a try because it really is just addictive. And again, we're looking to, get as many people involved just because we want to share this amazing experience.
There is one wellness thing, Steve, that people don't mention, which works for me, is that when I have a cold swim set for Saturday, for example, nothing that week leading up to it is difficult. Difficult client conversation. There's a problem with the construction. There's nothing is as tough as the Saturday getting out of the car and getting into the water. Everything in life seems easier.
Wow, that's absolutely true. And the other thing too is it's really great, whether it's the International Winter Swimming Association or the ice swimming community. There's always cold somewhere around the world, Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere. So thank you very much. I mean, this has been very educational for me, and I'm immediately going to the website and getting inspired again. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.